This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Welcome in another edition of the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast alongside Matt Youmans at Matt Youmans 247. I am Tim Murray. Week 6 of the college football season is here, and it is headlined by the Red River rivalry, shootout, showdown, whatever they're calling it these days at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas, Mr. Youmans. And how about that? You know, it's been an up and down roller coaster of a season. 4-2 for both of us last week. We'll take it, and would have been nice if we had been alerted that Jalen Daniels' back would be acting up, but such is life. But 4-2 for the pod, and we'll take it.
All right, let's move on to the Red River bloodbath last year.
Indeed. Number 12, Oklahoma versus number 3, Texas. This will be at noon Eastern on ABC. College Game Day will be at the site of the Red River rivalry. And as you alluded to, Matt, 49-0 last year. Texas obliterating the Sooners. Right now, you can get a 6 if you'd like the dog in Oklahoma. You can get a 5 if you like the favorite in Texas. Total creeping up, 61.5 at Circa and South Point as we record, but 60.5's still out there, Matt.
Yeah, this is a tough handicap, really, because I don't like to factor revenge into it too much, Tim, but revenge has got to be a big factor here for the Sooners, at least. When there's no trouble getting motivated for this game after you get your butts whipped 49-0. They were embarrassed in that game last year. Dylan Gabriel was not healthy. He is this time, and this Oklahoma offense is going to be in much better shape for this game this year. Now, when I look at these two teams, I see Texas much stronger on the line of scrimmage on offense and defense. And this Texas defense is legit. Tim, this is the best Texas defense I've seen in quite a while. I can't remember the last time I saw one this good. It's been 10 or 15 years. So I wonder how much success Gabriel and the offense are going to have here, because we just watched the Sooners struggle to score 20 points against Cincinnati a couple weeks ago. That gives me a little bit of a hesitation about playing the over, which I did bet over 60 this week. But the more I look at this game, I'm not crazy about that bet. I might end up playing out of it at some point, because I think this Texas defense is probably going to make things tough on the Sooners. Also, I went back and watched the tape of the Kansas-Texas game last week. I didn't want to watch the game when I heard that Jalen Daniels was ruled out, because that's going to be a loss. We got no chance now. Jason Bean actually played pretty well for a while, and the Jayhawks hung in that game. It was 20-14 in the third quarter. What bothered me about the Longhorns' offensive performance in that game, Tim, is that they did not bust out until the fourth quarter, where I think the Kansas defense was on the field for about 70 plays, really started to get tired. So, you know, we've seen shootouts in this game in the past, 55-48, 53-45, 34-27, 48-45. Those were the previous 4 matchups. But Lincoln Riley was involved in those matchups,
Yep.
And this is a little bit different now. So even though I did bet this over 60, I'm not crazy about the play. I'm leaning towards Texas as the side, and some of the sharper handicappers I've talked to this week lean Texas too, but it's interesting to see this number drop a tick or two.
Yeah, it's this is a spot for me. Preseason, I had 2 pretty big positions. Oregon State over 8 wins, and we're going to get to the Beavs. Don't love what I'm seeing right now with Oregon State, but they did get the cover last week against Utah, and Texas to win the Big 12. So this game really, Matt, doesn't necessarily make or break that bet one way or the other. Oklahoma is 5-0 ATS based off of the closing number, but you had Cincinnati plus the 14.5. That game closed, I think, 13.5 and ultimately landed at 14. One thing to note, Jatavian Sanders, who's an absolute stud, the tight end for Texas, there was questions about whether or not he would be available. Steve Sarkisian said, quote, JT looks great. So it looks like Jatavian Sanders will be playing. 13 catches, 278 yards, and a touchdown. Remember, he had 114 receiving yards against Alabama. He is, I don't know if he'll be a first-round pick, but he's going to be an early draft pick. A.D. Mitchell, the transfer from Georgia, really stepped up last week against Kansas. 10 catches, 141 yards, and a touchdown. And how about the run game? Because I was Curious, Matt, about Texas and how they would run the ball this year. Obviously, not only did you lose Bijan Robinson, but you lost Roschon Johnson as well. Two guys drafted in the NFL. Bijan, of course, going 7th overall. And in that backfield, Jonathan Brooks has emerged lately as just an absolute stud. His numbers against Kansas, 21 carries, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a long of 67. He had a big run against Wyoming as well, 61 yards. And his last 3 games, Matt, against Wyoming, Baylor, and Kansas, he's gone over 100 yards in all of those games, including the 218 performance against Kansas. And they're giving the ball a lot. He's averaging about 20 yards per carry. Final thought on me, I don't have a bet on this game, at least as of now. What do we know about Oklahoma? Yes, they're 5-0 ATS, but I had Iowa State last week in what I thought would be a look-ahead spot. They gave up some big plays early on in that game. Now, they ultimately shut Iowa State down in the second half. I thought the block punt kind of turned things completely sideways for the Cyclones. But, I mean, if Iowa State, Matt, is getting 20 points on you in the first half, is this Oklahoma defense ready for the challenge to slow down what we expect to be, or we believe to be, an absolutely electric Texas offense?
I don't think so, and that's one reason why I bet over 60 early in the week, because I don't think the Oklahoma defense is up to the challenge. I think that's the weak link when you're talking about the units on the field this week. So the Longhorns should be able to run the ball. And, Tim, the problem is when you're betting over, you don't want too much running. And I think Texas might just try to overpower Oklahoma with the running game, and that's one concern I have here. But like I said, there are so many different ways to look at this game, and I have a feeling it's going to go down to the wire, at least to the fourth quarter. And that's where I think Texas is going to show it's the stronger, superior football team. And I lean Texas here and over the total. But, man, I really don't have a lot of conviction on the plays in this game.
All right, let's go to 3:30 Eastern on CBS. Number 11, Alabama at Texas A&M. This game we will have a play on, I believe, both of us. Texas A&M coming into this game unranked, Matt, but seems to be kind of figuring things out. A pretty dominating performance, at least in the box score against Arkansas. Outgained them 414 to 174. But Max Johnson did turn the ball over 3 times in that game. Remember, Connor Wegman out for the year. Max Johnson has taken over as the starter here. Texas A&M's defense, maybe not in the secondary, Matt, but up front, they'll get after you. I believe number 2 in the country in tackles for losses. And let's just look at the most recent games between Texas A&M and Alabama. Last year, now Jalen Milroe started that game for an injured Bryce Young. Texas A&M went off as a 24.5-point underdog, and they had a chance in the closing seconds to win that game outright, lost 24-20. 2 years ago in the highly anticipated game because of everything that Saban and Jimbo had said back and forth via media days. That game, Texas A&M went off as an 18.5-point home dog, and they won it outright, 41-38. So very different point spread now, Matt. We've seen movement towards the Crimson Tide, or excuse me, the Texas A&M Aggies here quite a bit. As you see on the screen for those of you watching with us, 1.5 at DraftKings. I like the Aggies here. I was able to grab 3 earlier this week, but we're doing the podcast right now. I still like Texas A&M. I'm going to take them on the money line, even money. The question and concern and the rumors, the health of Jalen Milroe, who was seen out at practice on Thursday, but how healthy is that hamstring for Jalen Milroe? There's a couple, birds out there saying that he might have tweaked it during practice.
Yeah, it's hard to say. That was the rumor going around yesterday, and I like A&M in the game regardless. One thing that bothers me, Tim, is one thing you mentioned there, how big of an underdog A&M was in this game the last 2 years. And now, you're just getting 1.5 points at this point. Typically, when I'm going to call it a role reversal, when you go from a big dog to a small dog, that's basically a pick'em game at this point. I don't like to play teams like that in a dramatic role reversal type of situation, but I do think Max Johnson is a quarterback you can win with. 17 for 28, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns last week, and the Aggies ran for 204 yards. So this offense is good enough. A&M should have won the game in Tuscaloosa last year. You mentioned it. They had a shot. They should have won the game. And I think Nick Saban got off the hook in that one. I'm not sure he gets off the hook here. I like A&M. I'm going to play the small home dog. One thing you can say about Tim Murray, he always gets the best number. You got 3, right?
I did.
Actually, I think 4 was the best number.
There was.
Circa opened 4.
I know.
And it didn't take long for the Sharps to hit that and knock this down below 3.
Yeah. Well, I'm not gonna, be beating my chest. Well, I played at 3, and I'm not gonna. No, I'm still gonna roll with Texas A&M here. I did take some money line earlier today as well, because I'll be curious to see where this ultimately goes. Game day. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on the status of Jalen Milroe. Now, I know people are probably wondering about the Texas A&M loss to Miami, and it's fair. Tyler Van Dyke lit up this secondary, which I think is the weakness, Matt, of Texas A&M. He threw for 374 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. We haven't seen that from Alabama, from the quarterback, from the playmakers, and that's why I think this is strength on strength. Real quickly, before we hit a break here, the total in this one has gone down, I believe, 4 points. If anything, I would look towards the under. I have not played that yet, but I actually lean towards the under a little bit in this one. Circa now sitting at 45.5, still some 46.5 out there. I know 48's a key number. It blew through that. I think this is a low-scoring, kind of ugly type of game.
I could see that. I didn't play the total here, but I could definitely see that happening too.
A third straight primetime game for Notre Dame, Matt Youmans. How will the Irish fare? Can they keep getting off the mat after an easy cover last week down in Durham? More to come. It is the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast, taking a look at the Week 6 card.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
We keep it rolling here on the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Week 6, 2 games in the books. And let's get to a top 25 showdown in Louisville, Kentucky. Primetime ABC. Notre Dame, number 10 in the country. Louisville getting into the top 25 after a win, but not cover, thank you very much, against NC State. Easy winner for both of us last week. NC State plus the 3.5. Very interesting game because preseason, Matt, I circled this game as a massive letdown spot, maybe even a loss for Notre Dame. Certainly could happen. You look at the point spread sitting at 6, some 6.5s out there. But based off of the way the Duke game went, and now you look at what's next week, my question is not a letdown factor. It's a how much gas is in the tank factor for Notre Dame, playing in their 3rd consecutive primetime game, their 7th consecutive game, including a game where they were in Ireland to open up the season. Injury note here and positive for the Irish. If anyone watched Notre Dame Duke last weekend, they didn't have any playmakers at wide receiver. Jaden Thomas, 13 catches, 195 yards, 1 touchdown. He was out. And also Jaden Greathouse, 12 catches, 166 yards, 3 touchdowns. He was out. Both expected back, so big additions there for the Irish as they were both out. But how healthy will they be? I believe they were dealing with some hamstring injuries. Jordan Botelho, edge rusher for Notre Dame. He is sidelined the first half after that vicious targeting on the hip of Riley Leonard. But Notre Dame, 6.5 point favorite, Matt, down in Louisville, Kentucky. Should be a great crowd. I imagine, from what I understand, will break some records for the biggest crowd in Louisville history.
In the offseason, I circled this as a potential upset spot. Irish going to be on upset alert in this spot. Jeff Brom's going to pull out every motivational trick he's got. He's also going to pull some trick plays out of his playbook.
100%.
You can know that. So Brom's going to have it all ready for the Irish. But what concerns me a little bit about the Cardinals, I backed off this a little bit because, I also bet Louisville over 8 season wins. But a lot of that had to do with the weak schedule.
They're 5-0 now.
But it looks a little bit like a phony 5-0.
Yeah.
And going into last week's NC State game, you look at some of the offensive numbers for Jack Plummer, the quarterback, and the Louisville offense, and say, this looks pretty impressive. Well, Louisville really hadn't faced a good defense yet. I was really discouraged in the big picture by how the Cardinals struggled to beat Indiana. Had to hold Indiana at the goal line late to win that game by 7. Had to come back to beat Georgia Tech. And then last week, Tim, had to come from behind to beat North Carolina State. Fortunate to win that game. Believe me, I'm happy that Louisville's 5-0, but I think it's a bit of a phony 5-0. I don't think the Cardinals are strong enough on the offensive or defensive lines to go with Notre Dame for 4 quarters here. Unless Jeff Brom really has some big-time trick plays that work to keep the Cardinals in this game, I think Notre Dame's going to find a way to probably win this game by about 10 points. I don't love the situation because Irish were in in games that went down to the last play, essentially, the last 2 weeks, had their hearts ripped out against Ohio State. Then had one of the luckiest covers you're ever going to see last week against Duke. And I know that you thought that was such a huge game and that future for Fighting Irish football. So, and then you got USC on deck.
Yep.
So Notre Dame's got USC next week. DraftKings has opened that number. Notre Dame -2. Irish going to be home favorites next week. I'm probably going to be on Notre Dame here in some form. I'm just not sure what yet.
Fun fact, Jack Plummer, quarterback of Louisville, will be playing Notre Dame for the 3rd straight year for a third team.
And he's lost the first 2.
Purdue, 2021, lost, did not cover. Cal last year, lost, did cover, and now at Louisville. Jack Plummer, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions versus opponents not named Boston College. 5 touchdowns versus Boston College, 6 up, 6 down in the other 4 games. They can make some big plays, though, but I'll say this. So far this year, Notre Dame's defense has impressed me quite a bit. The biggest worry I had about the Notre Dame-Ohio State game, Matt, was the interior of that line. Pat Coogan, Zeke Correll, Rocco Spindler, they got beat up against Duke, so we'll see if they have a bounce-back type of effort there, because I thought Duke's interior was the better of that matchup.
And Notre Dame's got the nation's leading rusher.
Yeah, Audric Estime.
Yeah, he's got 672 yards. Irish can, I think, overpower Louisville at the line of scrimmage and run the ball if they want to. Last week, I've been watching Notre Dame football since I was about 1 year old, okay? When it was 4th and 16, I was sitting next to Tony Miller, the sportsbook director at the Golden Nugget. I said, Tony, if I had a betting account right now, and I would be allowed to bet every dollar I have on Notre Dame picking up this first down on 4th and 16. I would bet it. It's going to happen. Watch. And what happens? Sam Hartman scrambles for 17 yards on 4th and 16. I wish I could have live bet that play.
You knew it was going to come home. No doubt about it. They ripped the hearts out of those Duke fans who have been drooling and waiting, and Coach K has just been, wondering when they would get a legitimate football program. All right, let's go out west. You love to bet the Pac-12. This is not a Pac-12 after dark game. It is a noon local, 3 o'clock Eastern kick that no one will watch on the Pac-12 network, but you and I will bet as Washington State heads to the Rose Bowl. Both these teams coming off a bye, and this is one of those lines that makes you think. It's one of those lines that someone who has not been following college football, or heck, has been following college football, Matt, and says, wait, Washington State's undefeated. They're number 13 in the country. Why are they the underdog at UCLA? A UCLA team, the last time we saw them, Matt, scored 7 points against Utah. Why is this line's wrong? Maybe it is. I'm on the Bruins. What are you on?
Yeah, this is really interesting matchup, too, because I was on Washington State against Oregon State a couple weeks ago, and that played out about the way I thought. Washington State's been really impressive against Wisconsin, against Colorado State, and against Oregon State a couple weeks ago. 2 of those 3 games are at home. Cam Ward, 74.6% completions, 13 touchdowns, no picks. But, Tim, Dante Moore is a special player, the quarterback for UCLA, the freshman, and he was in a really tough environment 2 weeks ago in Salt Lake City. He threw a pick 6 early in that game. Bruins got off on the wrong foot. But this UCLA defense is the best, and it might be the best by far, that the Bruins have had since Chip Kelly's been there. Right now, number 6 in the country in scoring, allowing 11 points a game. Top 15 rushing defense, allowing 78 yards per game. I think this UCLA defense is legit here. And I know the Bruins played a couple cupcake opponents early, but I like the fact that Dante Moore went into a hostile environment in Salt Lake City and got his butt kicked. And he probably learned a lot from that game. And I think the Bruins are going to be a lot better when you see them at the Rose Bowl in Pasadena on Saturday afternoon. Oh, you might not see it because it's on the Pac-12 network. So you might just have to follow this game on your phone. Okay, that's unfortunate. The most unfortunate part of this is I'm so sick of it. I guess we don't have to worry about the Pac-12 network next year. It'll be the Pac-2 network, and every game from Washington State and Oregon State will be on the Pac-2 network. But it's, this is a hell of a matchup, and it probably should. It should be on a national network.
Be nice
on Saturday afternoon. If you get a chance to see Dante Moore, you're going to see a kid who's a special quarterback, special talent, and I think you're going to see a much better UCLA team in this game. Initially, Tim, I was thinking I might be on Washington State in this game. And then the more I looked into it, I said, I'm pretty sure UCLA is the right side here. And I'm going to go and lay the 3 with the Bruins. I was not going to lay the 3.5.
Yeah.
I will not lay 3.5 on anything. I'd rather bet a money line price or lay 3, and I'm going to lay 3 with the Bruins.
Well, you said earlier in the podcast, Matt, I always get the best number. Well, it's not true because I laid -170 because I was not going to lay the 3.5, and then the 3 showed up, so I jumped back in, and I'm going to be on UCLA as well. Yeah, I just think the cannibalization of this conference begins Saturday at the Rose Bowl, and UCLA, like you said, I think you said it well, best defense that this Washington State team has faced so far, and Cam Ward has been phenomenal, but I just think there are going to be some bumps along the way. I'll sneak this one in before the break here. Number 20, Kentucky at number 1, Georgia. I love Kentucky last week, and thank you, Mr. Ray Davis, for rushing for 280 yards, turning a Graham Mertz interception early that game into a touchdown. All week, no matter where you looked, whether it was on VSiN or ESPN, what kept being reiterated? Well, Georgia, they haven't covered yet this year. 0-4-1 ATS, trailed at the half against South Carolina, life and death with Auburn. All those are facts. They are 0-4-1 ATS, not covering by 8.9 points per game. I love this matchup for Georgia. I think Devin Leary is still a bit banged up. The transfer in from NC State with that pectoral injury threw for just 69 yards last week over Florida. The number's 14.5. There was a 14 out there earlier this week. See if you can get the 14 at some point. But I think Georgia rolls at home, night game between the hedges. I'm going with the dogs. Not the dog. The dogs in this one. Give me Georgia in this spot, Matt.
I don't disagree. Okay.
How about Michigan? They got their first cover. Will they cover this weekend? Matt has a play on the Wolverines. We'll break down Wolverines, Gophers, and a whole other games as we continue to break down the card on College Football's Betting Podcast.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Week 6 of the college football season is upon us. Matt Youmans, Tim Murray breaking down the card for you here on the College Football Betting Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Let's keep it rolling. After a solid week, hopefully we can keep that momentum going. Michigan finally got their first cover of the season. They took care of Nebraska 45-17 last week, Matt. And now they head on the road and they take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers. This will be a primetime game on NBC, 7:30 Eastern. And we've started to see a little bit of movement here in the market as one shop I see as we record this down at 17.5. You could still get an 18.5 if you like the dog, which is the way you're leaning in this one.
Yeah, I looked at some betting splits last night. It's a very popular page on the VSiN website.
I've heard, yes.
VSiN.com. If you go there, I saw 90+% of the money on Michigan in this game.
Woo-hoo.
And that's one thing that makes me lean to Minnesota. But also, what was everyone talking about last week? Well, Michigan really hasn't lit it up yet. Wolverines have not covered the number yet. I didn't like that going into Nebraska because, at some point Michigan's going to have a big game.
Just like we talked about with Georgia a little bit, right?
Probably going to happen with Georgia this week. It happened with Michigan last week. But I think P.J. Fleck's going to have his team ready for this one because Gophers got to be embarrassed by what happened to them at Northwestern a couple weeks ago. They blew a 31-10 lead to the Purple Cats and lost that game. Inexcusable. I think Minnesota is much better built to hang with Michigan. And let's say if you need the back door, the Greek gunslinger might be able to get there. Ethan Kaliakmanis, the Minnesota quarterback.
Well done.
He's I would say he's a step above a pedestrian quarterback, but you've also got Darius Taylor, who's a really good running back, 532 yards on the ground, 6.1 per carry. I think Minnesota can do enough in terms of offensive balance to keep the Michigan defense honest and stay in this game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout or an embarrassment. I'm embarrassed myself that I was on Nebraska last week against Michigan. I cannot believe that. That game was, as soon as the game kicked off, it was over.
Yeah.
I didn't even know the game had started yet, Tim, and I looked at my phone. It was 14-0 Michigan. I'm like, okay, this is sick. All right. And the Cornhuskers never even got close to getting back in it. It was never a game. I don't think that's going to happen this week. And with such lopsided betting action on Michigan, I'm going to take the ugly dog that nobody wants this week.
Love it.
The Gophers.
So like Paul Stone on VSiN Primetime gave out Georgia Tech this week against Miami. And I was like, ooh, I like it, Paul. Fresh off a loss to Georgia or to Bowling Green, who wouldn't want to take Georgia Tech? All right, we'll run through a couple games. I don't think any official plays. Actually, one of these will have an official play, but we'll run through a couple noon Eastern games. Big noon kickoff headed to Boulder. Nope, actually they're headed to Columbus. Wow, that's a shock. Columbus, Ohio State. Off the bye week, they are taking on Maryland, Ohio State, number 4. The Terps, I think you could argue, should be ranked, but haven't really played anyone yet. But they've been impressive so far this year, even though they had a couple sluggish starts against Charlotte and Virginia. They've got offense, but do they have enough to hang with the Buckeyes here? The Buckeyes, outside of their dominating win over Western Kentucky, haven't been all that impressive in the margin of victory. Obviously, Matt, their win over Notre Dame in the fashion that it was impressive. But does Ohio State get off the mat after a bye week and put it on the Terps? Remember, last year, it was not a blowout between these two teams whatsoever. Maryland hung around. I don't have a play on this game. It would actually be favorite or pass in this particular spot. So I like Ohio State a little, but haven't gotten there yet. What about you?
No play for me, even though I think Maryland's sneaky good.
They are good. 5-0, by the way. Shout out to Mike Loxley.
A lot of handicappers we respect, including one that you share plays with once in a while, Chris the Bear Felica. Mm-hmm. He was on Indiana last week getting 14. Hoosiers wiped out in that one. Didn't have a chance. On the VSiN Tonight show this week, Wes Reynolds called Tua's brother. I'll let you do the pronunciation.
Little Tua.
Okay. He called him the best quarterback in the history of Maryland football. I said,
whoa, Boomer.
What about Boomer Esiason? Okay. I think this Maryland team's legit. 5-0 at this point. Probably going to lose in Columbus this week, but I'm going to stay away from this game just because Ohio State. You know, when I bet against the Buckeyes, a lot of times it'll be a tight game going to the fourth quarter. Then they'll blow it open and cover the number. Tim, you know what I think of this Ohio State team? And that's not a lot. I think Ohio State's overrated. Notre Dame should have beat Ohio State 2 weeks ago. Ryan Day is living on borrowed time. Somebody's going to knock off this Buckeyes team. I don't think it's going to be Maryland, but like you said a year ago, this game went to the wire essentially.
It would be nice. A couple of years ago when Urban Meyer was still there, we thought Urban Meyer was going to collapse on the sidelines when this game came down to the wire and Maryland missed a 2-point conversion when the guy was wide open in the back of the end zone. But Maryland, Ohio State, 20-point spread, noon on Fox. Also noon on ESPN. LSU gave up 700 yards of offense to Ole Miss, 55-49 last week. This is a top 25 showdown as Missouri is actually the higher-ranked team coming into this game. The Missouri Tigers, number 21, and we've actually seen movement towards Mizzou in this game, Matt. This was as high as 6. It's down to 4. You can get a 4.5 if you do like the Tigers here in this spot, the Missouri Tigers. That is. Brady Cook can light it up through the air, and Luther Burden, you might not know the name, but that dude is electric, and LSU can't seem to stop a nosebleed in the secondary. Does Mizzou have a shot to be a live dog here?
I think so. I think the Tigers are live dogs, and Tim, this is my best bet of the week. Take the Tigers.
Can't lose.
You can't lose.
Can't lose.
That's
All
the
right.
oldest joke in the book. But I do think it's a dangerous spot. But Brian Kelly's going to typically gets his teams to bounce back the week after they've been embarrassed. So I'm going to stay away from this one just because I would like Missouri probably quite a bit if LSU had found a way to win that game in Oxford last week. But off the loss, I think Kelly's going to get his team to show up. I'm going to have to pass here.
Matt Youmans, you can always death, taxes, Matt Youmans betting the last game on the card, and that is Arizona USC. You got to have late night action for the people. Pac-12 after dark, ESPN 10:30. Number 9 USC against Arizona. Maybe a little look ahead, huh? A little look ahead.
Yeah.
Ooh, USC headed to South Bend next week. By the way, Matt was on Colorado last week, and USC took their foot off the gas. Colorado was able to easily get in the back door. Actually had an onside kick to try to get the ball back to tie the game up or maybe even win it outright down 48-41. Wildcats looked apart last week. Pretty impressive. They're catching 21.5 pretty much across the board, Matt. What do you see Arizona in the Coliseum late night Saturday?
Yeah, I'm interested in this game. Like you said, Trojans got to look ahead to Notre Dame next week. And typically you don't want to lay these big numbers when a team's got a bigger game on deck. Noah Fafita was the backup quarterback who started for Arizona a week ago with Jaden DeLora out. Tim, I really liked Arizona last week, but I couldn't play it because I didn't know if the backup quarterback was going to be any good. He had only taken a few snaps in his career. He played really well, 27 for 39, 232 yards, and 3 touchdowns with a pick against Washington, and that game was 31-24. I believe whether it's DeLora or Fafita, I don't think we know yet who the quarterback's going to be. But now Jed Fish knows he's got 2 quarterbacks who can play. And also, don't forget about this. The Trojans are off kind of an exhausting game against Colorado. Anytime you play at altitude, it takes a toll on you. And this is not talked about a lot, but sometimes you want to fade teams the week after they play at altitude. And that might be the case here with USC. It might not. USC might win the game by 50. But I'm taking the 22 with the Cats here, mostly, Tim, because the Trojans have Notre Dame on deck.
There's another game late night, but we won't get to watch it. It's on the Pac-12 network, and it's a game that I am intrigued by. I think it's a little bit of a sleepy spot, easy for me to say, for my Beavs, Oregon State. I'm a little worried, honestly, for my position on their win total because there are some holes in this Oregon State team. They are very one-dimensional running the ball, and they are on the road at Cal, catching 9.5. This will be a 10 o'clock Eastern kick. Pac-12 After Dark, Pac-12 Network. It is going to be a sleepy environment. You and I both took Cal when they played Auburn, 4.5-point dog, lost by 4. What could go wrong here? But Justin Wilcox as a dog, you've heard it before, I'll say it again. He's phenomenal. And how about this stat from Stuckey over at the Action Network? When Justin Wilcox is a home dog of 4 or more, Matt, he's 10-1. ATS.
Wow.
This is a Cal defense, 7th in the country in EPA per rush. All Oregon State can do, Matt, is run the football. I think this is an ugly game. A little bit of a look ahead for Oregon State, feeling themselves a bit after beating Utah in the fashion that they did. Wasn't a pretty game. I think Cal covers. I think Cal is a bit of a live dog late night in Berkeley.
I agree. And in fact, the only reason I did not send this in as a play is because I want to get 10 with Cal.
That is
not
true.
9.5. I went to 10. And again, about 10 people will be watching this on the Pac-12 network.
Matt and I will be streaming it somewhere late Saturday night. How about Coach Prime and those Colorado Buffs? Matt's got a thought on them next.
This is VSiN's College Football Betting Podcast.
Week 6 of the college football season is here. That's Matt Youmans. I am Tim Murray, and we are continuing to work our way through the college football card. We will recap our best bets as well at the end of this segment. And Matt, how dare we? It is this 4th segment of this podcast, and we haven't mentioned Colorado yet. Colorado did get the cover last week, fighting for bowl eligibility right now as they are 3-2. I would love to see Colorado in a bowl. I think that would be great for whatever bowl gets it. Maybe the Las Vegas Bowl. That would be nice. But Colorado on the road, Pac-12 Network, again, my God, that's the theme of this particular podcast, the disgust that we have, that 3 games that we've got to bet on, and we won't be able to watch them, but we digress. Colorado visiting Arizona State. And Arizona State seems to be getting a little bit of money here. DraftKings still has a 4.5, but 4 is pretty much across the board in favor of Colorado. Travis Hunter still sidelined after that big hit in the Colorado State game, Matt. 6:30 Eastern time on Pac-12 Network. What do you like in Colorado, Arizona State?
I laid 4 with Colorado early in the week, and I have to admit, I don't love the bet here late in the week. I thought from something I read led me to believe that Travis Hunter was going to come back this week in Tempe, and obviously that's not the case. He's going to miss this weekend, next week. But, Tim, when I look at the schedule, Dion is a motivator. This game is basically for a bowl game.
Yep.
I think if you look at Colorado's schedule, if the Buffaloes win this, they're going to get to 6, and they're going to get to a bowl game. If they lose this week, they might not get to 6 wins. This might be a 5-7 team. This is a really big game for Colorado. I don't know what's going on with Arizona State. 3 weeks ago against Fresno, the Sun Devils could not have looked any worse. They looked terrible. In the second half against Oklahoma State, they looked terrible. They got shut out 29-0 by Fresno on their home field. Then they came back and they were competitive against USC into the fourth quarter, competitive against Cal last week. Suddenly getting some decent quarterback play and seem to be on the improve. But I think you got the far better quarterback here with Shedeur Sanders. And you got a Buffaloes team off 2 losses I think is going to be hungry to get back on the winning track this week. I just don't trust Arizona State. But I also don't love this play. I bet Colorado -4, and I would say I'm lukewarm on it at this point. Sometimes the plays you bet early in the week, you really don't like that much late in the week, and that's kind of how I feel about it.
If you go back and listen to last week's podcast, that's how I felt about South Carolina.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know. I still bet it, and I gave it out, but I don't know. And sure enough, there we go with pick 6. I saw a tweet. I think it was from Pete Thamel. Maybe it was Andy Staples talking about the pick that was a pick 6 there. By the way, Trenton Bourguet, his brother Trayson Bourguet, is the quarterback at Western Michigan. So a pair of brothers in FBS football. 8 o'clock. How about this? Network television for a second time this year for the Pokes of Wyoming. Wyoming hosting 24th ranked Fresno State. Kalen DeBoer has done not Kalen DeBoer.
Kalen DeBoer was at Fresno.
Yeah, he was at Fresno.
He's doing a hell of a job at Washington.
Jeff Tedford, excuse me, Freudian slip. Jeff Tedford has done a really nice job with Fresno so far this year. They are now the favorites to win this conference, them and Air Force. Is this, Matt, a tricky spot for the Bulldogs going up to Laramie, laying 6?
Oh, yeah, it's a tricky spot. Tim, you're not going to believe this, but I thought about going to this game. I was going to fly up to Denver, drive up to this game, because right across the street from War Memorial Stadium is Taco John's, one of my favorite fast food spots. I've been up there many times for UNLV basketball games. Laramie, Wyoming, one of the underrated stops on the West Coast. But no, I also thought it's going to be a hell of a game.
Yeah.
And Jeff Tedford and Fresno State have won 14 in a row. I don't think a lot of people realize that. The second longest win streak in the country behind Georgia. And Fresno's already won a couple big road games at Purdue, at Arizona State. And I think Mikey Keene, the quarterback who's a transfer from UCF, has regressed a little bit the last couple weeks. He hasn't been that sharp. But he's got 69% completions and 14 touchdowns. He's got pretty good numbers. The one thing about Wyoming, it's such a one-dimensional offense. It's basically a ground-oriented attack, and not many big plays the Cowboys can make through the air. The one thing that put me on Fresno here early in the week is I think you all are going to get a fully focused Fresno team here that thinks, hey, this is a tricky spot, like you said. And if we can survive spots like this, we got a really good chance playing in a New Year's Day bowl game, right? Yep. In the last 2 years, Fresno against Wyoming, 30-0 and 17-0. Fresno's outscored Wyoming 47-0, if you can do that math, the last 2 years. So I laid to 5.5 with Fresno.
Yeah, I initially looked favorite here. More the week went on, more people I respect. Brad Powers came on VSiN Primetime and said his favorite bet of the week was Fresno State,
right?
-5.5.
Okay.
So it did spook me a little bit. More people I talked. I mean, the Wyoming offense very, as you alluded to, not great. And anyone out there, by the way, who had Fresno State minus 25.5 late on Saturday night against Nevada,
wow.
My condolences. That was
not as bad as Duke, though. If you had Duke plus 5.5.
If you had both, oh boy, that is less than ideal.
How about if you had Northwestern, Duke, and Fresno State?
Might want to give it up for a week. Before we get to our best bet recap, a couple other quick notes. Another Mountain West game, the Tim Murray win total bowl. I have over 4.5 wins for Colorado State, under 5.5 wins for Utah State. Utah State, how about their win? Blocking an extra point in the closing minute against UConn to prevail in Stores or wherever they play their football games. I think Hartford, 34-33. Note here, McKay Hillstead, who came in to replace Cooper Laga, the starter for Utah State, is more than likely going to be out for this one. And this is one of the biggest line moves of the entire week, Matt, as Colorado State opened as a 4-point dog, and they are now a 3-point favorite. I like Colorado State here. I'm not going to personally play it because a Colorado State win and a Utah State loss is very beneficial for me when it comes to win totals. Couple other quick notes. North Carolina, Matt, is taking on Syracuse. They get Miami next week, but the reason I bring this game up, Matt, as North Carolina undefeated, and they got incredible news, way overdue. Tez Walker, the transfer from Kent State, finally eligible to play. So, while the NCAA is too busy making sure that Jacksonville State and James Madison can't go to bowl games, they figured out, hey, UNC, you're allowed to have Tez Walker. They are laying 9.5 there. And last note here before we get to our best bet recap, we got burned on this last week. Pete Thamel just tweeted this out as we record this on Thursday. Kansas quarterback Jalen Daniels doubtful for the UCF game, so it means that Jason Bean more than likely gets the start again for the Kansas Jayhawks.
Jason Bean played okay last week against Texas. I thought, thrown in there at the last minute. He had the Jayhawks within one score in the fourth quarter. I thought he played pretty well, so I'm not going to play that game this week, though. A lot of money on UCF.
Yeah, they are a 2-point road favorite, are the Golden Knights. All right, Matt, let's get to what people have been waiting for, the old best bet recap, and you can start it off.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to go with Oklahoma, Texas over the total of 60.5. And again, I bet this early in the week. I'm not as crazy about it now. I'm concerned about the Oklahoma offense. His ability to create some big plays against this Texas D, which is it's the best Texas defense I've seen in quite a while. And I wonder if the Longhorns are going to just try to overpower Oklahoma on the ground with the running attack, and that would shorten this game. Tim, we haven't seen I don't think the dramatic reduction in plays or the lower scores in college football this season that we thought we might with the running clock, and the new clock rules. But We've seen a lot of shootouts in the Red River game over the years, and I think this could be another one. I don't like this play quite as much as I did early in the week, but I'm still going to stick with Oklahoma and Texas over 60.5. I do like UCLA, short home favorite against Washington. You can find -3 out there at a few spots. Texas A&M plus 1.5 against Alabama, and we're questioning the health because of a hamstring with Jalen Milroe, the Tide quarterback. The ugly dog that nobody wants.
Love it.
The Gophers. We're going to go with P.J. Fleck in Minnesota. It's plus 19.5. You might get 20 by kickoff. I'm going to add 2 more. Not on this graphic. Let's go Arizona plus 22. We're going to have some late-night Pac-12 action. Arizona plus 22 and Fresno minus 5.5.
All right. More love adding to the card as we go. Final thoughts for me on my best bets as we wrap it up here. Georgia minus the 14. Gave that one out earlier this week. 14.5's out there. I think they take care of business and roll. See if you can get the 14 before game time, but I do think the dogs, not the dog, takes care of business. Texas A&M on the money line. UCLA minus the 3. And Cal against my Beavs plus the 9.5. For Matt Youmans, I am Tim Murray. This has been the VSiN College Football Betting Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe. We'll talk to you next week right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.